All right, I will go ahead and get us kicked off. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the latest Lead One Virtual Forum. I can now proudly announce we've done over 50 Lead One Virtual Forums since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. This conversation is going to be a great one here, I think. We've got a great panel set here. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, but before I do that, I want to first go through a couple quick housekeeping items. For those who have yet to join us for a Lead One webinar, all attendees other than panelists will remain in a listen-only mode for the entire discussion. However, if you would like to ask the question, there are a couple ways that you can do so. First would be to use the raise hand function. This is part of your control panel at the bottom of your screen. This will recognize you to me to unmute you individually. And second, you can also use that Q&A button also as it appears on your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Clicking on this button will allow you to submit a question for each of the panelists here. And finally, today's webinar is being recorded. All Lead One members will receive a copy of today's recording alongside a written recap within 24 hours of the webinar's conclusion. So I'm actually going to allow our moderator to introduce or allow the panelists to introduce themselves. But first, I want to introduce our moderator. We have Dr. Carissa Niehoff. She is the Executive Director of the National Federation of State High School Associations. We are delighted to have her as well as our other two panelists today. But without further ado, I don't want to take up any more of their time. So Carissa, I'm going to kick it off to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and welcome everyone to the virtual forum. First, let me say that I hope you are well, and your families are well, and if you are coaching or serving in an athletic administrative type of role, that your transitioning back to activity is going successfully. We are certainly not out of the woods when it comes to responding to COVID-19. So our fingers are crossed, and on behalf of everyone at the NFHS, we wish you luck. Before we get into the panel discussion itself, I'm truly excited to allow our two other guest panelists to introduce themselves today. Following their introductions, we do have a series of questions that will take us through some very rich conversation about perspective around name, image, and likeness issues when we look at both collegiate and especially high school athletics. And following about 40 minutes of conversation with our group, we will then entertain any of the questions that you might have as participants through the methods that Hannah has outlined for you. So super excited to be with you today. Anson, seeing you in the center of the screen there, your photo, would you like to start with your own introduction?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for finding a picture of me with hair. Fantastic. It's all fallen out since, which is why I'm wearing a hat. But I'm a huge fan of high school athletics. I competed at La Villa Saint-Jean as a boy in Fribourg, Switzerland. I played every sport that my high school offered because we had a 26 individual graduation class. 5 of us could change directions, and so you had to play every sport. And I absolutely loved my high school athletic experience. I ended up going to the University of North Carolina, where I played collegiate soccer, and I absolutely loved that as well. My father's ambition for me was to be an attorney, so I was prepared to do that. Of course, I was sidetracked because I fell in love with coaching. The guy I played for at the UNC retired. I got the job as a head men's coach while I was getting a law degree, and then all of a sudden they gave me a women's team. So I was coaching 2 teams. I dropped out of law school, and I loved coaching at UNC ever since. And so for me, I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing at your level. I'm excited to be a part of this panel.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so my name is James Parker. I'm Director of Athletics and Student Activities here in Alexandria City, home of Remember the Titans. Alexandria City High School is here, formerly known as T.C. Williams High School. And prior to my taking this position here, I was Director of Sports for the AAU, for Amateur Athletic Union, down at the national office in Orlando, Florida. Also worked with the Orlando Magic and a couple of semi-pro basketball teams. So youth sports has been my passion for a long, long time. And I was just talking to Dr. Niehoff about some of the, never met her before in person, but heard her name. And we know a lot of the same people, you know, as the sports community is very, very small. And even with Coach, didn't realize he has family here in the area and knows the Alexandria area very well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation with everybody on the call.
Well, thank you very much, James and Anson, for your introductions there. Obviously, the expertise is in the room. So let's go ahead and take advantage of the short time we actually have together today. Dive right into a conversation about name, image, and likeness, which has tremendous energy around it in our general public, in our sport community, of course, in our ecosystem, and certainly plays a role in all of our thinking as we talk about the development of our student athletes and the implementation of our programs, and certainly how we make sure those developmental pathways are healthy. At this time, and you all probably know this, and for the benefit of the audience perhaps as well, we have just 10 states, if I'm not mistaken, that have not either passed or proposed legislation that allows for collegiate student athletes to benefit from name, image, and likeness. I believe it's 24 bills that have actually been passed as of late July, 2 actually awaiting governor's signatures, and 14 that have been introduced with very good momentum. As we look across the bills that have been passed or proposed, we see a few common provisions, and I've just pulled out 4 just to get our thought process juiced up here a little bit. One being that name, image, and likeness can't be restricted by institutions. The second being that collegiate student athletes can obtain professional representation, agencies. Third, that a student athlete's contract terms cannot conflict with the institution's contracts or team rules. And the 4th most common provision is that an institution cannot provide an athlete or prospective student athlete name, image, and likeness compensation. With those common provisions being very visible, however, we also see across our analysis of the bills a willingness to provide additional NIL benefits and funds, seemingly to create a competitive recruiting advantage, i.e., come here and you might be able to receive NIL benefits now. So that, of course, causes our high school ecosystem to be on alert. I can tell you from the NFHS perspective, we don't have our head in the sand. We know that student athletes in our age group are entrepreneurs. Many are very talented. Many are in situations where agencies, contracts are in front of them and benefits might be available. However, we have been really trying to preserve the experience of a student athlete with that high school jersey on, and try to prevent that experience from becoming a professional experience. All that being said, sort of to kick off our thinking around NIL, James, maybe we'll start with you with this question here. How do you think name, image, and likeness might affect high school students who want to play on their high school team, but their state athletic association will deem them ineligible if they do? Do you foresee that being a large problem?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm actually a proponent of it. On the college level, I think it's a long time coming for those athletes. I worry about it on the high school level from the standpoint of just the education and knowledge you need to have to just enter a contract and what type of things it's going to cause to happen. From a public school standpoint, especially here in the DMV area, the competition that we have to keep our elite level athletes in a public school to private schools is always been a major issue. And I think what will happen on the private school side, on the public school side, if it's not allowed and we don't show some type of ability to let the kids sign these particular deals, then a lot of them will just go to private schools, and then private schools will hide them, allow them to do it anyway. So, from an experience for high school students, I think there are a lot of high school students who love to play in their communities, want to play for their local high school, may not want to go to a big time, quote unquote, private school. And if the ability for them to make money comes about and they're not able to do it, we prevent that. I do feel like it'll kind of push some of the kids away.
Thank you for that. Anson, how might you answer that question? And just let me know if you want me to tee that up again for you.
No, I understand what we're chatting about right now, and we're kind of excited about the name, image, and likeness at a collegiate level for all the reasons that you guys can certainly appreciate. There's a great sort of minor at UNC on entrepreneurship, and I have the privilege of lecturing in this curricula periodically, and I absolutely love it. And the thing I love about this, and the reason I encourage any one of my kids that's majoring in anything to minor in entrepreneurship, is because it's monetizing your passion. If you had to define entrepreneurship, that's basically what it is. And I like that idea. I like monetizing your passion. And of course, things that James, you fully understand, and Dr. Niehoff, you do as well. We're fighting an interesting battle here in women's athletics. We're trying to figure out ways for them to get equal pay. And anyone that knows anything about the fight that's going on right now at the highest levels of women's soccer, our elite athletes are suing our own federation for equal pay. And so if you even look at the average salaries in the NWSL, which is our pro league, the average salaries just aren't that high. And so what we would love to do is we'd love to create an environment at a collegiate level for our young women where they do have opportunities to make some money. And to be honest, I would love to see something done at a youth level where these young kids also have a similar opportunity. Because I don't want the public schools to lose all of their elite athletes to the private schools. I'm a huge fan of public education, even though I did go to a private school. My brothers and sisters were educated in private school and the public school system, and I'm a huge fan of that. So what I would love for us to consider is some sort of compromise where we do figure out a way for these kids to make some money. And for me, it's a real struggle. I am investing a lot of my speaking engagement money to market our women's soccer team at the University of North Carolina, because they gave me this beautiful new stadium. And I think the future for us in women's athletics is to figure out a way to sell out our stadiums. And for that to happen, we've got to figure out an investment in this area. I want my kids to make as much money as possible, because right now, if you look at the typical salaries in our sport, and I'm not talking about for the Rapinos and the great ones, the Mia Hams, et cetera, but the average athlete, it's just not high enough. So we're doing everything we can to sell out our stadium so we have visibility, so our kids can generate an income. Because I think for us on the women's side of the equation, we've got to figure out a way to have them generate income. So for me, I'm excited about this. I'm excited to see what's going to happen on a collegiate level. And I have no issue if this bleeds down into a high school level, because like James is saying, let's not make this something where all the private schools end up attracting all the top athletes. Let's continue to allow them to generate income. And in some households, as you two know, it's critical for the kids to contribute in some fashion to the income of the household. And so I am in favor of this. Are there going to be problems? Dr. Niehoff, absolutely. Call me. I might be stabbing myself right between the eyes with whatever collisions we have. But one thing that's kind of cool about what we're doing collegiately is we're going to make a lot of mistakes that I think you guys can learn from at a high school level and then maybe correct them. But I genuinely don't want to prevent a young entrepreneur, male or female, at a youth level, high school level. I don't want to prevent her from figuring out another revenue stream, but also, believe it or not, developing this, monetizing their passions. So I'm behind it in a very aggressive way.
I appreciate that, Anson. You had mentioned something a little bit earlier in your remarks about the challenges that are very visible in women's soccer. And I'd love for both of you to answer this kind of spin-off. Do you see any concerns, or should there be controls around NIL benefits such that the differences that already exist are not exacerbated, be they across high-profile sports, across genders? I had a conversation with a colleague, and we both kind of swallowed hard and said, field hockey's not football, but we need to pay attention. What do you both think about NIL influence on differences, or can it work to actually resolve some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a little bit difficult because of the private enterprise of if Pepsi, Coke, Nike comes to you, it's going to be hard to tell them, I guess, what somebody's worth is. But when you look at some of the data now, it seems like a lot of our young women are doing a lot better on the NILs than it is the male athletes. You have a lot of gymnasts and some of the smaller quote unquote non-revenue sport athletes that are doing pretty well setting things up because they know how to brand themselves and they have a better social media presence. So I think I kind of agree with Coach. I think that this is an avenue, I think, for some of our young women who are athletes to actually make money off their likeness and then also promote their sport, which in turn then gets more people to come actually watch them play. I mean, our volleyball team last year won a state championship for the first time in history. And one of our young ladies did some type of TikTok dance or something, and it went viral. And I'm just thinking now, she might have been able to get some type of deal off of that because she has, 500,000 people that watched this video and the team was behind her and all this other stuff. And, so they were kind of just thinking and not even thinking about making money, but just having fun. And with that, now, from an entrepreneur standpoint, you get those young minds thinking about, okay, actually, how do I go about making money off of doing this and contracts? And so I think you can, from a public school standpoint, we can spin this into an educational type situation that I think will benefit us in the long run. Will there be issues and problems? Yes. I mean, you see it already on the collegiate level. There's going to be schools that are getting a competitive advantage recruiting wise. I mean, Illinois, I know they have an NIL manager person, that's their job to help the athletes with those things. There are going to be some schools that can't afford to have that position. So you're already seeing it now kind of hidden in different ways. So I think it's just, keen on us to try to stay on top of those things and do what we can to educate everybody.
James, spot on. The stuff you're referencing is absolutely spot on. It's interesting, though, when you brought up Dr. Niehoff about the major sports. I still think the football and basketball players, their primary source of income is going to be how successfully they navigated their collegiate careers to sign, obviously, big contracts upon graduation. So football and men's basketball are pretty much taken care of. So it's us at sort of a non-revenue sport level, an Olympic sport level, that I think we can benefit from with this name, image, and likeness. And I love the fact that James was talking about his volleyball team that got all kinds of fantastic exposure. And I would love to see that. So if you look across the spectrum, we think this is an opportunity for us in our sport to generate some real income if we do things the right way. So I still think that let's see what happens. I am curious to see if there can be some money generated in a very real way. And I'm not sure, to be honest, and no one is absolutely sure.
Right.
But James mentioned this earlier. It's amazing how much money some of these gymnasts are making. I think there was a woman in Louisiana. It's extraordinary, her social media platform. James was also right in what he said earlier. The women are much better at a younger age with social media, but also understanding the value of their brand and the fact they can take care of it in a very aggressive way. So I think there are going to be all kinds of routes to success in this. Will there be mistakes that we're going to make at a collegiate level? Absolutely. But I think these will be cautionary tales that all of us can learn from. And will there be advantages in Division I, where all of a sudden these different schools are going to be advertising what their name, image, and likeness is generating? And I even saw something
Right.
BYU. BYU ended up with this donor that all of a sudden took care of scholarships, I think, for the entire football team.
Called the walk-ons.
I have all the details down right now, but I'm looking at this thinking, are you kidding me? And I'm a Mormon, I might call the guy up and say, hey, can you take care of my entire 30-player roster at UNC for women's soccer? Because if that kind of generosity is out there, I mean, there might be all kinds of positive things. So for me, I'm just, I'm excited. Am I naive? No. Do I think there are going to be some disastrous moments? Absolutely. But I think, are we going to benefit in general in my sport? And I'm going to say yes.
And the other thing about that is whenever we prevent stuff from happening, especially in the sports industry, when that's why the NCAA, I feel, has kind of got put in this position, because they said no for so long, and everybody turned on the NCAA, and now it's kind of like they're the FBI. People, oh, the NCAA is coming. When I was with the AAU, if anybody from the NCAA was around, it was like they were the FBI and they were coming to get you. And it really shouldn't be that way, especially with our youth. It should be more open, and let's figure out how to do this in a responsible way. Because if we say no to it, they're going to figure out ways to do it anyway, in the wrong way, and then all of a sudden they're not eligible to play, and then you have all these crazy stories coming out. I just think we should try to tackle this ahead on the front side, so that we don't have those issues.
Yeah. I appreciate both of your answers there, your thoughtfulness, and your obvious very positive outlook on the potential here, with also being realistic. So is it respectful of the past, realistic about the present, and optimistic about the future? So Anson, I think if they built you a nice TikTok dance studio in your beautiful new stadium, you could start there. Who knows?
Well, I don't know how much you know about my family, but if anyone Googled my eldest daughter, Michelle Dorrance, she's a MacArthur Genius Award winner in rhythm tap dance.
Oh, wow.
One of the greatest, tap dancers of our generation. So trust me, we could bring her in and some sort of TikTok studio, and we could go to town. So hopefully in between performances, we can drag her back to Chapel Hill and have her teach my kids on what's going to sell. So Dr. This is a great idea. I'm going to call my daughter up as soon as this ends and let her know that, my gosh, there was this woman from the high school association that has an incredible idea for us, Michelle, and I'm going to pitch the idea. So thank you.
Absolutely. And in all seriousness, the footwork that can be developed is amazing. So, but yeah, just keep us informed on how that could be a best practice that's emerging out of this forum today. So
That's very true.
All right, let's move on. And actually, on a number of occasions in your comments, you've segued right into a next fantastic question, which is, how do our school systems support parents and student athletes in the process of getting educated, securing contracts, getting paid? What can school systems do? What do maybe we need to do for them to put them in a position where they're poised to support? Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously just providing some type of educational format for them to come to and be able to answer questions for them is obvious, something you want to do. But I do think, and in your local communities, I mean, like here in Alexandria, everybody loves the Titans. If we have our star football player, everybody in the community knows who that is. Now, nobody outside the community may not know this person, but here in the community, there might be somebody here locally that wants to sign him, and hey, we want to name the hamburger after you over here at our community hamburger store, and people are going to run over there and buy this hamburger, and we'll give you some of the proceeds from that. So it could be those kind of small things within the communities that we can kind of help with. And I think the schools then can kind of maybe broker some of those deals to make sure everything is legit and all the rules are followed and everybody's doing the right thing, to help some of our athletes, to help our coaches, to help our different programs, in order to make this, effective. And obviously, from a national federation standpoint, working with our different states and making sure everybody's kind of on the same page, because, as in the seat that as you said, Dr. Niehoff, every state's different and how they want to run things. I'm sure Texas and Florida would be wide open with this type of stuff, whereas other states would be a little bit more conservative. So, once again, we don't want people leaving, just like with the whole situation with COVID. We had kids moving out of the state to go to states where they can go play their sport because our state was closed, but Maryland was open and this state's open. And, it just caused a lot of mass confusion. So trying to get everybody on the same page, which is very difficult to do, I think is part of that process as well.
And thank you, James. I agree with everything you just shared. And Dr. Niehoff, I think this might be an opportunity for the high schools actually to expand another educational platform. I mean, heck, business schools are going to be studying this aggressively. And even though there's not really a business course at a high school level, maybe what this will generate is this opportunity for the local entrepreneurs in the communities to actually teach this sort of thing in the high schools. And so all of a sudden, maybe this could be another platform that we could extend to our high school kids. And maybe the principals that are most aggressive in pursuing this can use this as a draw, but also as an educational tool. Because holy cow, if we could get our high school kids excited about, attending a business class within their own high school, about learning how to basically brand themselves through name, image, and likeness. I mean, holy cow, they're going to be ahead of the game. And for me, I think there are all kinds of positive ramifications of this. And I'm one of these people, as I mentioned earlier, I have been defending high school sports forever. What happened in my sport is this thing called the Development Academy. And the US Soccer idea where they wanted to rip all the elite high school players out of soccer and basically tell them it's not worth it for you to play high school sports. And I was outraged by this. And I publicly came out and spoke against the Development Academy, even though one of my former players was aggressively supporting the opposite side. Because I think the high schools have huge value athletically, certainly within the social aspects of their community. And for all kinds of different reasons, you can develop in a high school environment that these club teams can't extend to you. And so for me, I've always been in great defense of the value of these communities and the high school teams and those coaches whom I absolutely love and have always supported. So I think this might be another opportunity within the public high schools across the country, because certainly the privates can do this, but I would love to see the publics actually develop a curricula, a business curricula on branding. And what's the incentive? Well, I'm going to teach you to brand yourself so you can make money in name, image, and likeness, or be an agent, a junior and high school agent for the freshman athlete that just come in, because NLI is an opportunity. And all of a sudden you've got this, future entrepreneur, begging this, great basketball player that's just come in, or football player, or whatever sport player coming in, and I will represent you. I'm becoming an expert on this. I think the educational opportunities off this that are extended to us across the full range of high schools is extraordinary. So I can see all kinds of positives with this if we handle it the right way.
Sure. And both of you have repeatedly emphasized the importance of education and engaging all of the right people in the educational process so that it is a healthy developmental experience. We certainly know that kids are getting paid to simply stream. Many of them are up at night on whatever screen they're on, streaming certain things, searching sites, and if they have any degree of an NIL already, they're earning a little bit of money for that. So the kids are in that world. We certainly do need to play a proactive role from an educational perspective, no matter what happens legislatively.
Yeah, I mean that's the future. That's the future. I mean, you look at how Netflix is trying to change the movie industry, and the music industry is changing as well. I mean, you can we were talking about singing earlier. I can put an album out tonight and get it on iTunes. I mean, we'll see who listens to it, but you could do that physically right tonight without any help and without a label, if you will. So I think this is kind of the future. So we should be kind of ahead of it, even though I'm like Coach. I mean, I believe in high school sports. That's why I decided to stay in youth sports, and I wanted to kind of work on the high school level. And I believe in it. I believe what it does, for the community, for the kids. But we also have to give our kids the ability to be part of whatever the future is there presenting them. So if we can kind of hone those skills, like Coach said, I think is a great idea.
Well, certainly if you put something out on social, let us know. You'll get a lot of likes. With thinking about the notion that high school student athletes or students, period, because obviously we have other types of arts such as tap, we have music, we have speech, debate, we have all sorts of opportunities for kids to be an influencer. Do you think that the high school student should follow guidelines of collegiate student athletes? Should they be a little more protective, a little more restrictive, more educational background, age, stage? Have you thought about the alignment with collegiate versus high school?
Well, Dr. Niehoff, first of all, I think that's a wonderful question. Obviously, I don't have enough experience in this to give an opinion that I think has any real value. But here's what I'm curious about. What I'm curious about is let's give them an opportunity, I guess, to make mistakes at first. And then once we see where the areas are that we have to legislate, let's come back and then start to correct it a bit. This is going to shock you, but I have a collegiate program that doesn't have any rules. I am in the nexus between basically obedience and principle-centered living, because obviously the moral authority for our youth growing up are their parents, and certainly their inspirational high school teachers and their church leaders. And in that environment, the moral authority is the parent or the high school teacher or the youth spiritual leader. And basically, you're directed in the right direction by these moral authorities. And so basically, it's sort of an obedience environment. Once they get to college, the shackles are off, because if they don't want to go to class, they don't have to go to class. Mom's not here anymore to get you out of bed to send you to class. And so now my job as a college educator is to get them from just being obedient to rules to learning to live a principle-centered life. And so this is an interesting job I've got, because what I have to do is to teach them principles of living so they don't get into trouble. But honestly, I think if we're too strict and make too many rules, I think we're gonna be making mistakes in this area. So I think what we should do is we have to figure out a way to explore it together and allow these kids to be a part of the decision-making we're making, so it doesn't become this us against them thing, which is what it came to with the Development Academy, where all of a sudden the Development Academy was ordering their top players not to play high school soccer. And I'm thinking, are you freaking kidding me?
Still doing it.
Because, you know, they should have the right to do whatever they want. And all of a sudden, yeah, if you played high school ball, you could no longer be a part of the Development Academy. And I have a local parent that relies on my judgment about whether their kid should join the Development Academy. I said, listen, I've seen your kid play. You tell that Development Academy team that your daughter's going to do whatever the heck she wants. And if they want her, they're going to have to make an exception for her. Now, what they did is they did make an exception for her. And before they made the exception, they were an average team in our region. They allowed this kid that's a multiple sport athlete play anything she liked. They went from being an average team in the Development Academy to the best team in the region. Because I think cross-training is one of the best ways to develop an elite athlete, not to specialize. There are overuse injuries, there are all kinds of problems with this. And so I think what I don't want to have happen as we enter this area is for all of us to start jumping on top of any problem and making rules. Let's explore this sort of rule-free for a while. And then if kids are getting in trouble and making mistakes, then let's correct that to basically protect our kids. And so for me, I think this is how we roll this out is going to be very, very important. And the biggest mistake I think we can make, if we want to make sure they don't agree with anything we're saying, yeah, let's set up constitutional rules they have to follow. Because when I was in this boys' boarding school, I couldn't wait for someone to declare a rule. I was going to break it at my first opportunity. And so I think what we have to do is we have to understand human nature, but we also have to protect the kids. And so for me, this is not a entirely black and white area. It's a gray area. And I think the only thing we have to manage is we have to figure out a way to keep all of these kids safe.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Coach. I don't think you should over-police the situation. It's funny, it's only really certain athletes that get policed, right? If I sing, I can go sing at a local bar or wherever and make money and come and sing in the choir. I'm in the band. I can play piano here and go play for a band and make money or put something out. Movie, theater, any other genre is okay. And then there's certain sports that are not really overregulated, you know, tennis and golf. They go to the country clubs, people pay for them to get lessons, and it's okay. But if somebody paid a basketball player or a football player and paid his way to get private lessons, all of a sudden now the NCAA is asking questions about, well, wait a second, why is he getting paid and why are they paying this for him? So I think if we over police it, then people are going to just break the rules, and you get more of the people, bad influences within the sport, to try to help people around the rules instead of us, the keepers of it, of the sport, to kind of educate you through it. So I think Coach is right on with that thought process.
Thank you both. We have another question that had been submitted that has to do with advantages and pitfalls of implementing NIL opportunities in high schools. And you've already both touched on both throughout your remarks, what we have to be careful of, what could be a real positive outcome. Do you foresee anything else in terms of the culture of high school sports inside the locker room, so to speak, that could be advantage, pitfalls, or around the hallways of the schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think I read a quote. I think Urban Meyer said that he felt like it could hurt the locker room from a standpoint of just jealousy. But I think you get that anyway. I mean, there's always going to be the best girl on the team, the best guy on the team, and they get the most attention. And at the end of the game, that's who the media wants to interview. So I think part of that process is really educating our coaches on how to get your athletes to handle those type of situations, because it is, you know, a real thing, and kids get a lot of pressure from not being, quote unquote, the best, and feeling kind of left out if they're not the ones, you know, able to make money or, you know, get an interview from the media or whatever it might be. So I think those problems are already kind of prevalent, especially in the high school arena. You know, college, Coach would have to speak on that, but I'm assuming it's probably the same type of thing there, and managing those egos, if you will. But I mean, that is an issue that you'd have to manage.
You know, it's interesting. First of all, James, thank you for that, because I absolutely agree with you. And Dr. Niehoff, what a great question, because for me, the value of athletics extends beyond the playing fields. And part of what James is referencing is all the different issues where we have these collisions of egos and everything else. But, you know, if we have any real value, if sports has any real value, it's in learning to navigate these issues, because these are basically issues that you're going to collide with in the real world outside of athletics. Mm-hmm. A great environment to practice your skills in this area, because let's face it, I love athletics. Sports are a part of every day of my life, and I absolutely love it. But you know what? In the greater measure of things, it doesn't really matter. But what does matter is how we navigate it. How do we navigate our issues in athletics? Because the way we navigate it there is almost like a practice session for the real world. And so for me, holy cow, can we learn a lot from learning to navigate the different issues in sport? Because for me, in the academy, in the ivory tower, in the environment I'm in, there's a regular debate of the professors getting together saying, you know, why do we even want sports on our campus? Well, I have the privilege this coming spring to teach a course about performance. It's been blessed by the academy. I will have some real instructors alongside me teaching this course. And what we're going to teach basically are the lessons we learn from athletics, because a researcher on our campus studied what happened to the graduates at the University of North Carolina in athletics compared to all the other graduates across the spectrum. And what was really interesting, because we have this thing called golden tickets, we can have athletes admitted that don't compete with the rest of the population. What was staggering for her research to demonstrate is how extraordinarily successful these athletes were post-college in the professional worlds. And I'm not talking about the athletic worlds. And so there's a huge value in the education of sport if you do it properly and you teach the right things. A part of our 13 core values is how you navigate basically your own suffering. Are you this, feverish, selfish little clod of ailments is complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. That's a George Bernard Shaw quote that every one of my kids memorizes before they get here as a freshman. Because what we want to eliminate from our culture is whining. There's nothing more destructive in sport than whiners, but also in the real world. My gosh, I've got a Georgetown consultant working with me right now, and she talks about the de-energizers, the people that just destroy the lives of everyone around them. Well, boy, can you spot them on athletic teams, but you can also spot them in real life. And so what you're training within your athletic environment is how to not be a de-energizer, to be the opposite, be a positive life force. And so for me, the lessons that we can teach within our sports for the real world in life are extraordinary. And so I think we've got great opportunities here if we do this the right way.
Well said. James, any thoughts relative to that question?
No, I mean, Coach hit it right on the head. I mean, it's really about education and how you present the information to the kids and how you help them navigate through it. Ultimately, every kid's different. I've learned that and here, even in the high school level, every kid that you talk to is different. I mean, I preach to our coaches all the time. You can't coach every kid the same way. Some kids you can scream at and yell and they take it. They need it. Some kids that come in here and say, I need the coach to yell at me to motivate me. And other kids, if you do that, they go into a shell. So, it's not a one size fits all thought process. I think we have to think about it from a very holistic point of view and knowing that there's different communities, different types of people. And, I think there's enough bright minds in this sport community that, to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you both, gentlemen. We're at the point in our agenda that we would be happy to invite questions from any of the participants, either about NIL or about either of these two outstanding professionals and their backgrounds, their areas of expertise, any more motivational messages they might offer you. But I don't know, Hannah, if anyone has, I can check chat. I don't see.
A question in there about.
Yeah, Carissa, there's a couple questions in here. I can go ahead and read them off if that would be helpful.
Great.
The first one in here talks about different security measures. Will security measures be recommended to be taken into account for these high profile or dollar making athletes?
Maybe we can start with you, Anson. If you're living at the collegiate level, you're probably at close touch with this.
Yeah, we've got obviously an office on campus that is the main job is to make sure we protect our kids in very aggressive ways. We all are educated in any sort of issue that pops up in any area of suffering for a student. We've got to report it immediately and we've got to take care of it aggressively. And so that's one of my, I guess, part of my job description is to protect the young women that I'm training. And so, yeah, I don't think name, image, and likeness is something that's going to exacerbate this in any way. In fact, I think what it's going to do is it's actually going to celebrate our community in a positive way. So I don't see a real security issue for us. Now, of course, I could be surprised, but right now, Dr. Niehoff, I don't see any sort of security issue with the direction we're going in right now.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, if it's a kid on the high school level, that's big. He's going to probably not be in school very long, or they're going to be paying for their own security team. But I mean, I've been around a lot of high-profile athletes on the high school level, and usually the community kind of protects them. They grew up there, so it's not like I grew up around Allen Iverson. Everybody knew him. He was around. Everybody's going to protect him, type of thing. I think once you get to college and above, I mean, even on college campuses, I mean, you're at University of North Carolina, there's been some very big superstars that people have known they're going to the pros. And I'm assuming they did well there on campus and they didn't have any major issues. So I don't think that'll be a major problem.
It's a great question, though. I appreciate it. At the high school level, we talk a lot about school security. We seem to have really stepped up our game around the academic part of the school day. Mm-hmm. And then when that bell rings at 2:30 and that proverbial rock gets poked in the back door of the gym, do we need to worry about the safety of our kids? And I would agree, just, based on my own experience in schools as a coach and AD, that those kids, the elite athletes, get protected. I don't know that they ever buy a piece of pizza by themselves downtown, but they seem to be protected by teammates and community. And certainly, though, that would be a topic of conversation, that as we grow our educational efforts, we need to build that in. What are the alerts, protections, even action plans we have to have in place if we have, somebody with a contract that is now a member of the student body? And yeah. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, no, and I've actually got another question similar to something that you had touched on, Carissa. The question reads, will NFHS or the NCAA be giving modules to student athletes on guidance to personal branding?
You want to talk about NCAA, Anson?
Yeah, we are so thoroughly ahead of this. The kids get stuff all the time. And they're presented in all kinds of different ways. And so, yeah, but there are, I guess we're training them on how to handle this. And so we're very, very sort of proactive in making sure that every one of our kids is fully educated according to what our athletic director wants us to review. And he's very, very consistent in making sure we get this out. In fact, I would say right now, we've been in school preseason and everything else for the last, I guess, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. We've had 4 different e-blasts sent out by our leadership on protocol. So we're educated, and I have turned over this. I've got someone on my staff whose full-time job is to deal with social media, and she's educating and training my kids through the protocols that have been sent to us by my athletic director. So we are very, very conscious of trying to do this properly. And the protocols are all there. They're public. They're disseminated every single week. And so I'm pretty confident we're going to check all the boxes in that regard. And I would assume all my competitors will be doing the same thing. Since we all want to do this the right way, I would assume this is happening across the spectrum collegiately.
And James, you've had so much experience nationally. Are you hearing from your colleagues from previous organizational work or your own school district?
Yeah, I haven't heard too much from a high school level. Most of the high school groups is really just say, we're not dealing with it, we're not doing it. So it's, I think it's, I mean, you know this, Dr. Neal, working in the high school space, it's out of all the major sports organizations, a lot of times the high school is usually the last to kind of come on to whatever the new wave of thing is. And I think that's only really because you're dealing with kids, so you can't just throw them out there. We have to really kind of be tedious with how we go about, about bringing about new change and new ideas and concepts. But, I know from, once this kind of gets launched and you start seeing it, we'll have to have some things put in place to do that.
Yeah. And I would say if I could piggyback on that, James, we talked within our own office and within our membership when NIL kind of hit as a new acronym in our lives. We said, what are we going to do? And we thought, we really don't know enough yet. Let's see what happens at the legislative levels. Let's get a sense of this momentum. Let's see what's happening at the collegiate level. Maybe let's watch a little bit of the D3 experiences. Let's watch to see what resources are developed. But we also know we have to be out in front of this as well, right, with a better understanding of what some of the best practices are through recruitment, through transition, through decision-making about how to function as a family within the community, as a school. So
yeah, and
we
I know
have a little bit more learning to do.
Yeah, and I know working with, I'm still on the board of directors for the AAU, and we do a lot of work with Nike. Nike's big in the basketball space, for example. And I know they're having a lot of talks internally of because they have a lot of those elite level athletes that play in their programs, on how we're going to handle that and what type of educational tools you can kind of give them, because they're going to utilize that experience just like they'll utilize their high school experience to kind of promote and build their brand. And if high school, they say, well, you can't wear your high school uniform, okay, well, I'll just wear my Nike, EYBL uniform then, and it's like, okay, well, who wants that, from a public school mindset. It's not always run like a business because it's not a business, but a lot of times when you get into certain situations like this, you may want to open those blinders up a little bit from a high school perspective, because it can help the schools. A lot of schools are not funded very well, depending on where you live, what city, your taxes and those type of things. So this actually could be a way for the school to actually generate more funds, not only the actual athlete, but actually the school as well, if they're involved in that process. If not, it's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen.
I've got
Any other
one more question. Yeah, I've got one more question here in the queue. It reads, how can teams participate in NIL so all players at all levels can benefit?
It's a good question.
I know I heard something today from, I don't know if it was University of Iowa, but their offensive line collectively got an NIL deal from a local barbecue place. I guess those guys eat there a lot. They've named some stuff after them or something. So I think they've kind of collectively got together and done that. So I think from a collective group, I think you'll see more of those, and kids will make more money collectively than they will kind of individually. It's kind of like, I'm a Carolina basketball fan. So like Carolina basketball, Duke basketball team, Notre Dame football. I mean, there's certain teams I think that would be able to kind of galvanize the troops, if you will, on a collective, then, especially in your local communities.
Mm-hmm.
And James is spot on. We're trying to do the same thing. We've got some really high profile athletes actually that have graduated that are going to try to do something that they will share with the athletic department and also the kids on our roster. So we're trying to make this stuff collective every chance we can, because we want everyone to benefit in some way. And this way, obviously, this addresses the issue we chatted about earlier about jealousies. So when an elite athlete can figure out a way to share her largesse with the roster, talk about things that are positive for chemistry. And so, yeah, we're also doing our best to see what we can do collectively. So James, yeah, you're spot on.
I appreciate that question. It's actually, if that's the last one in the queue, Hannah, that's a great one. We're talking about everyone benefiting.
I actually had another one that just popped in. I'll go ahead and read it off. What's the best way for a company to approach a college or university on sponsoring an athlete to remain compliant? They give an example here. If a player is done with their high school season, can an athlete or team be approached if they don't have eligibility left? Or would it jeopardize any championships or awards they've previously won?
I don't know how to answer that. I think they have to be in college, correct, before they can sign these type of deals.
I believe so. I believe they have, or they're a prospective student athlete being actively recruited. We would have to dig into the weeds of the specific state.
Yeah, because every state's different with that.
Yeah, but I would think if there's a gap year, yet they're actively being recruited, depending on what the laws are, it would seem that they should be able to be in line with prospective student athlete benefits. I don't know, Anson, what do you think?
Honestly, I don't know the law in that area at all. I would hate to, speculate on something and then be absolutely wrong. So if you don't mind, Dr. Niehoff,
Yeah,
I don't know how to address that because I just don't know the rules and the law yet in that area.
yeah.
Fair enough. So that actually concludes the Q&A session. I would like to ask each of our panelists to give just a quick closing comment. Again, we appreciate the time you've taken today to speak to our membership, but any closing comments? Anson, I'll go ahead and start with you here.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate being invited in. And my main mission when I was invited in is to let all of you guys know publicly my total support of the high school athletic experience, because that's genuine. So that's why I'm here, because I totally support high school athletics. I just support any kind of sport at any level. And so for me, that's why I had no issue letting Oliver know I would certainly jump in on his request. So for me, that's why I'm here. I am a huge fan of high school sports. All my kids, I have 3 kids, they all participated. And so for me, it was a great experience for them. But I have to tell this story just so you understand the way I value this. My oldest daughter, the tap dancer, and if you guys are bored, just type Michelle Dorrance into your Google and just check her out. She was playing middle school soccer, and in the middle school soccer stadium is basically a couple of like tin slats on top of a couple, posts. And so if there are like 6 people at the game, you can't fit in the stands. So basically 4 sitting and 2 more are watching. And my kid loved playing her middle school sports team. And the poor coach, when he gave his halftime talk, he didn't have a locker room he could take him into. He had to do it right out there in the field. And of course, he knew who I was. And I'm sitting there listening to his halftime talk. And he would twist himself into knots to try to sound like he knew something about the game. And I absolutely love the man. And I love the man because my daughter absolutely loved playing for him. He didn't have to, be an expert on, Man City's, 1-3-5-2. He just had to love my kid and make sure she had a good time in every single practice. And I really regretted not thanking him at the end of that season. And then, if God isn't a friend of mine, I met him at a cocktail party about 20 years later. And I said, listen, I just want to thank you for what you did for my kid. She loved you as a coach. She loved coming to the practice environment. And what this is all about, in my opinion, it's about, having her trust adults, having adults that have her best interests at heart, having adults that understand how to run a training environment, even if they know nothing about the sport. What does it have to do? It has to be fun. It has to be, getting the kids together, and they have to be enjoying themselves. And so for me, I love everything about sports. Even now, I can hardly move anymore. I've got a torn left hip labrum. I've got 4 slipped discs. My left knee is deteriorating. I'm falling apart. I play pickleball now because it's a sport I can play where you don't have to move. But I absolutely love it. And so for me, it's all about the community of the people you associate with in sport. And so what do I like about this? I would love for a kid to be able to make money in some way off a sport she loves. I would love for her to become a young entrepreneur, regardless of the sport, and learn something about it, from a business perspective, but basically fall in love with what they're doing and share that basically with the world. So I'm here because I support, every one of you guys that works at a high school level and all these people. And it's not like you're doing it for a paycheck. Are you kidding me? I know you're not. You're doing it for love of these kids, for love of the game, love of your communities. And for me, that's where I'm here, basically to thank all of you, because I am behind everything you're doing 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with Coach. I mean, that was well said. For me, I think this whole experience, we just have to keep our eyes open. We have to, trust the process and not be afraid of it. I think, the media spins a lot of things. They're going to make things sound a little bit more scary than they really are. But you have to trust yourself, trust your community, that you're kind of the keeper of that community. Because at the end of the day, the kids are going to come to the people on this phone. They're going to ask you the questions. They're not going to the media with the questions. They're coming directly to you. So it's really, incumbent on us to get all the information that we need and educate our families, educate all the athletes and coaches so that they're making the right decisions and kind of embrace it, because this is the future. This is where it's going. We've kind of known this for many, many years. So, it's here. So let's embrace it and figure out the best way for people to have a pleasurable experience with this and not get in any type of trouble and not be on, CNN with some outlandish story or ESPN, news break, So, I really think it's an opportunity for us to kind of clean some things up and keep the riffraff out, if you will, and do things the kind of the right way. So I appreciate everybody on this call and what you do for sports.
And I would just try to maybe wrap things up by saying thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for really Anson and James, getting to know both of you better and really appreciate both of you. You are truly evangelists in your support for high school sport. And on behalf of all of us at the NFHS and in our ecosystem, thank you. We think that the work that we are doing is truly special work. We all experienced how uniquely special it was when we didn't have it the last 18 months. And we didn't have engagement with our caring adults and our teammates. We saw what happened to mental health. Now that we have it back, we want to absolutely embrace it in new ways. And we want to be in the 21st century. I would love to be able to have more conversations like this with positive, thoughtful voices in the room. Really, thanks to Lead One for inviting us to come together to have this conversation with all of you. And if there's anything the NFHS can do to help advance the greater work of sport that we all are doing, we stand ready to do that. So pleasure working with all of you today. And Hannah and Bart, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you all again. Great conversation here. As I mentioned at the top, we will circulate this recording alongside a written recap, hopefully within the next 24 hours. But with that, I will leave you to the rest of your afternoons, and thank you again. We'll see you next time.